कूफे का और शाम का मंजर, कूफे का और शाम का मंजर, याद जब आ जाता है बाबा, दिल मेरा फट जाता है बाबा। कूफे का और शाम का मंजर, कूफे का और शाम का मंजर, कब्र पे शब्बीर की करती थे आबिद बुका, हो गए क्या क्या जफा सुनिए शहे करबला। सर पे किसी के न थी चादर, याद जब आ जाता है बाबा, दिल मेरा फट जाता है बाबा। कूफे का और शाम का मंजर, कूफे का और शाम का मंजर, एक रसन में बंधे छोटे बरों के गले, बरसरे दरबार सब इस तरह लाए गए, कोठों से बरसात थे पत्थर, याद जब आ जाता है बाबा, दिल मेरा फट जाता है बाबा। कूफे का और शाम का मंजर, कूफे का और शाम का मंजर, कूफे के बाजार में मजमाए कुफ्फार में, कूफे के बाजार में मजमाए कुफ्फार में, एक तमाशा सा था आले सितमगार में, ऐसे में माँ बहने खुले सर, याद जब आ जाता है बाबा, दिल मेरा फट जाता है बाबा। कूफे का और शाम का मंजर, कूफे का और शाम का मंजर, बाली सकीना का गम दिल ये नहीं भूलता, सबके थे शाने बंधे उसका बंधा था गला, दर्द से वो रोती थी मुझतर, याद जब आ जाता है बाबा, दिल मेरा फट जाता है बाबा। कूफे का और शाम का मंजर, कूफे का और शाम का मंजर, तोक से हरगिज न था बाबा मेरा सर झुका, तोक से हरगिज न था बाबा मेरा सर झुका, हाथ करी और बेरियां कोई मुझे गम न था, देखा नहीं जाता था वो मंजर, याद जब आ जाता है बाबा, दिल मेरा फट जाता है बाबा। कूफे का और शाम का मंजर, कूफे का और शाम का मंजर। मोहम्मद वाले मोहम्मद सल्लल्लाहु।
सल्लल्लाहु मोहम्मद वाले। हाय सकीना हाय जिंदान, हाय सकीना हाय जिंदान, हाय जिंदान। गम सकीना को मिले इतने मुसलमानों से, गम सकीना को मिले इतने मुसलमानों से। मर गई पर ना कभी, मर गई पर ना कभी हाथ हटे कानों से है। गम सकीना को मिले इतने मुसलमानों से। शाम जाते हुए नाके से गिरी यूं बच्ची, शाम जाते हुए नाके से गिरी यूं बच्ची। मश्क गाजी की गिरी जैसे कटे शानों से है। गम सकीना को मिले इतने मुसलमानों से, गम सकीना को मिले इतने मुसलमानों से। चौंक उठती थी मदीने में ये कहकर बानो, चौंक उठती थी मदीने में ये कहकर बानो। कोई आवाज़ मुझे देता है वीरानों से है। गम सकीना को मिले इतने मुसलमानों से, गम सकीना को मिले इतने मुसलमानों से। कितनी बेदर्दी से जालिम ने उतारे वो गौहर, कितनी बेदर्दी से जालिम ने उतारे वो गौहर। शह ने बेटी को जो पहनाए थे अरमानों से है। गम सकीना को मिले इतने मुसलमानों से। मुझको कुर्ते में ही दफनाना सकीना ने कहा, मुझको कुर्ते में ही दफनाना सकीना ने कहा। मत कफन मांगना है भाई मुसलमानों से है। गम सकीना को मिले इतने मुसलमानों से, गम सकीना को मिले इतने मुसलमानों से। कोई गैबत में उन्हें देख के खून रोता है, कोई गैबत में उन्हें देख के खून रोता है। रिश्ता रहता है लहू आज भी जिन कानों से है। गम सकीना को मिले इतने मुसलमानों से। सब चले जाते हैं शबीर को रोकर अकबर, सब चले जाते हैं शबीर को रोकर अकबर। एक बच्ची नहीं जाती है अज़ा खानों से है। गम सकीना को मिले इतने मुसलमानों से, गम सकीना को मिले इतने मुसलमानों से। मर गई पर ना कभी, मर गई पर ना कभी हाथ हटे कानों से है। गम सकीना को मिले इतने मुसलमानों से। सलवात।
Assalamu alaikum everyone. We are gathered here again on this third night for the Arbaeen program at Razavi Community Center to give our pursa for the shahadat of Sayyidatul Shuhada Imam Hussain alayhi salam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Inshallah, program will continue tomorrow at the same time like today. We'll start with Maghrib Salat, followed by the Majlis inshallah. And then on Arbaeen day, which is on Wednesday, day after tomorrow, we'll start with Zohar Salat, Jamaat, and then we have the program of Arbaeen inshallah on the day after Zohar Salat, and then followed by Niyaz on Wednesday. There is Niyaz tonight also, so stay with us after the program for the Niyaz inshallah. Request for Surah Fatiha for the sponsors of tonight Majlis. Dr. Shaban Ali Jamal Bhai Contractor, Khurshid Banu Muhammad Ali Kapadia, Fatima Muhammad Ali Baidani, and request for Surah Fatiha for Marhumin of Ghulam Hussain Mauladina family, Ghulam Hussain Khaki family, Musa Virji family, Ahmad Nanji Kara family, Ramzan Ali Manik, Leela Bhai Manik, Amir Bhai Sundarji, Hassan Rahim, Yusuf Ali Ghulam Hussain Mauladina, and Marhumin of all of our Marhumin of volunteers who have served this community for a long time, no longer with us. Kul Mu'minin and Mu'minat, Muslimin and Muslimat. Al-Fatiha. Couple of requests again, if you can come a little bit towards the member closer, so people coming later don't have disturbance. If you put your cell phone on silent, we don't get disturbance. And with your loud salawat, I'll request Sheikh Jaffer to start his majlis for Muhammad wa ali Muhammad salawat.
فاتحة بالله من الشيطان بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين بارئ الخلائق أجمعين باعث الأنبياء والمرسلين صلى الله وسلم عليك يا رسول الله صلى الله وسلم عليك يا نبي الله وعلى آل بيتك الطيبين الطاهرين صلى الله وسلم عليك يا أبا عبد الله يا ابن رسول الله يا رحمة الله الواسعة ويا باب نجاة الأمة يا غريب يا مظلوم كربلاء ما خاب من تمسك بكم وأمن من لجأ إليكم فيا ليتنا كنا معكم سادتي فنفوز والله فوزا عظيما. قال الله تبارك وتعالى وهو أصدق القائلين بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ونفس وما سواها فألهمها فجورها وتقواها قد أفلح من زكاها وقد خاب من دساها. آمنا بالله صدق الله العلي العظيم. صل على محمد وآل محمد. Assalamu alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I begin in the name of Allah, the most kind, the most merciful. It's due to that kindness and mercy that we have these opportunities where we gather in remembrance and glorification of Him Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. We send our condolences to our 12th and living Imam Al-Hujja Ajalallahu Ta'ala Farajahu Sharif, and to Ma Salli Ala Muhammadin wa Ali Muhammad, and to each and every one of you as we continue our remembrance over the tragedy that befell upon the household of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi wa Alihi wa Sallam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad wa ajil farajahum. We pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that we all get an opportunity to go for the ziyarat of our Imam to Karbala, and that we receive their shafa'at in the hereafter, inshaAllah. So for the past 2 nights we've been developing a topic, and the main point from the first lecture was that when Allah Azza wa Jal gives us inspiration to become better servants, to become better believers, it's really important that we capitalize on those moments. And then yesterday we looked at a quality that will aid us to become, so that we can reach the destination that is available for us through that inspiration of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it's the quality of determination. How to be a person who has azam, determination, and we looked at some of the requirements for that determination. Today we look at another quality, that is a huge assistance for us as we strive to become better servants, as we strive to become better believers, and it's the quality of self-restraint, the ability to have control over ourselves, to know what our limits are, and to put an end to certain temptations that may be arising within me, for example, right? Self-restraint is not an inherent quality. It's not a quality that we're born with, right? Like, for example, if I give a child a gadget, and I say, here, you can watch while I finish some work, but you can only watch 20 minutes. If I myself don't come back in 20 minutes, that kid will keep watching, right? And I can't blame the kid for keep watching, because the kid don't have self-restraint, right? Like, the same thing happens to us. We end up binge watching at night. We don't have self-restraint. And so we find that self-restraint is not a quality that we're born with, but it's a quality that has to be learned, right? And it's a quality that's really essential in every aspect of our lives. As I gave the example of just watching Netflix, for example, not even something bad. Let's say I'm watching Mukhtar, for example, right? Even then, there's a certain time when I say, I need to go to bed, right? But if I don't have that self-restraint, I'll just keep hitting next episode. But self-restraint is something that can control that for me. Self-restraint is essential when I eat something delicious, and to know my limits. Self-restraint is essential when I'm speaking to the opposite gender, right? Do I control myself? How do I smile? Where do I put my hands? All of these things matter when we speak to the opposite gender. And it's self-restraint, that quality that will control us from doing something that we may regret. I remember I give this example often, but when I left high school, I went to college. And when I walked into college the first day, it was shocking to me, it was absolutely shocking to me that you didn't have to go to class. You know what I mean? Like, there was no one there to tell you, bells ringing, go to class. You kind of have to map it yourself, force yourself to go to class. They already had my money. They didn't care if I went to class or not, And so I had to be disciplined. And that's something that, we don't train ourselves with. We don't train ourselves to become self-disciplined, to have self-restraint, to be able to say no, even though I have the ability to do these things. But just periodically, for our soul to hear the word no is very powerful. Sometimes we don't realize that how our soul responds to never hearing no, never hearing, bas, that's enough. And when you look at the idea of self-restraint, it's one of the only characteristics that we have that can combat our desires, right? Our desires is a discussion that is really important for us to understand, is that our desires, we often talk about desires desires are inherently not bad, right? Like Allah Azza wa Jal has given us all desires, and without these desires, life would not be productive, and it wouldn't assist us. They assist us in preparing for our akhirah, right? So desires like what? Like love for myself, right? Hubbu Dhat is one of the inherent gifts that Allah Azza wa Jal has given us. Now, Hubbu Dhat, when we talk about self-love, sometimes it sounds bad, right? Like to say that, oh, you have an ego or something, but it's self-love and self-protection that, for example, makes me go take a shower. I don't want to smell, for example, right? That's that thing which makes me go see a doctor if I'm ill. If I really didn't care about myself, I forget it, right? Let me just live. But the fact that I have this self-preservation is good for me. And it's that self-preservation, that self-love, that if we were able to look long-term, that I don't want to go to hell, so let me do whatever is required to not go to hell, right? And so that's why God gives us these desires, so that I eventually use them to create my akhirah. So desires like anger, right? Desires like love, all of these things Allah Azza wa Jal gives us and wants us to utilize them, but at the same time He wants us to utilize them in a manner that will become beneficial for me and not harmful for me. Right? And this is that struggle of life, this is where balance, finding a balance, man. If we can ever learn how to find balance in life, balance between using what God has given us and not overusing what God has given us, that's another magic key that I was telling you about. Yeah, this key that, if we have certain keys, right, that can open every door, this is another key, finding balance, right? And to know how to navigate this world. Like what happens with our desires is that we have to use these things. We have to eat. We have to sleep. We need love. Anger is part of that. Sometimes we do get angry. Looking after myself. All of these things we have to do because that's how this world works. We have to utilize these things. But something really interesting happens as we use them, The more I use my desires, in turn, the more powerful my desires become. You know what I mean? It's just a natural progression. It's just like a muscle. The more you use a muscle, the stronger that muscle becomes, right? Similar with our desires. The more you use them, the stronger it becomes. And it recognizes things. The signals of the brain are really powerful, And so, for example, like if I am hungry and I eat, and then I felt good and satisfied after eating, the brain just learned something that, hey, if you want to be happy, eat. And so now I'll be prompted to eat, even though I may not be hungry, but my brain wants to feel that satisfaction again, right? And so what begins to happen is that now my desires become stronger, right? You look at other examples, like if I buy something and that buying something makes me happy, rather than buying things that I need, now I just buy for the sake of happiness, right? So we go out, we order Amazon things, even though we don't need them, but I just like the feeling of getting stuff, right? This is how our desires work. And so what we have to do is we have to make sure that these desires become checked, because if they don't, instead of me using my desires end up using me, right? And this is where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in a really beautiful verse of the Quran, in surah number 25, verse 43, He says, "Ara'ayta man ittakhadha ilahahu hawa." He says, have you seen the one who takes his desires as his ilah, as his God, right? And so my desires want something, I do it. My desire demands something, I do it. And this is one of the, like we talked about this a couple of days ago, but this is one of the unfortunate corollaries or results of living in an affluent place like we do, right? When we have availability, and then even though I may not necessarily have the means to buy it, but hey, I got a credit card, yeah, I can buy it with that, not caring that I go into debt, for example, right? Like this is a great tool of this capitalistic world that we live in, right? That even though you may not have the means, still go get it, right? Why? Because it'll make you happy, right? I remember when I used to be in college, or university, I used to work for a debt collection agency. Oh man, I didn't like that job at all. Yeah, like to call people and say, pay your bills. And if you do that job, then barakallah, yeah, like it's good. You can handle it. But I really didn't like it because I saw how people, so there were some people who would go to debt intentionally. They didn't care. But other people were just tricked into going into debt, right? So like I worked for a company that would send out live checks to people, right? So like they send out checks. So most people, you get this, you just tear it up, right? But if you sign it and take it to the bank, you signed a contract automatically. And so they would send these checks to people in like third world of America, right? Like so, like in the South or wherever, where they didn't have financial means, but they would send it to them like during Christmas time, right? And so people want to buy gifts for their kids, they want to do these things, and then they go into debt, right? With like an interest rate of 25% on top of that. And so these people are now in debt for like 9 years over a $2,500 check, right? But why? If you would ask them why, they said, man, I really wanted to buy something, right? And so that urge that we live in this world where things are available to us, that in itself is a test for us, yeah? Just because things are available doesn't mean I have to go and get it. This is where you and I have to be able to control ourselves and say, you know what, just because I can get it, and even if I can afford to get it, sometimes it's okay just to sell yourself like no, right? Like it's that whole division that we have to learn between a want and a need. You know what I mean? Like if you can separate wants and needs and concentrate primarily on needs and not go after wants as much, not saying don't enjoy this world, but concentrate on the needs. Wants are something that maybe you can treat yourself to once in a while, right? But if we don't have that control, that restraint, eventually our desires fully have control over us, and then we can't control any aspect, neither my ability to talk to people, what I watch, what I eat, what I buy. All of these things now begin to govern me. And so as we said, one of the qualities that is really important is the quality of self-restraint, right? And in Arabic, this self-restraint is known as iffa. Yeah, and a person who practices self-restraint is known to be afif. Yeah, a person who is afif is a person, you can translate that as virtuous, but it's also a person who has certain amount of control over themselves. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He uses this in the Holy Quran to describe to us an example of a person who is afif, who has control. And He talks about this in Surah Al-Baqarah, verse number 273, when He talks about who should sadaqah be given to, right? He says, lil fuqara, that it should be given to the poor. But there's a specific type of poor that God wants us to target. He says, alladhi uhsiru fi sabilillah. These are the people who are absorbed in sabilillah. So like they are committed to the path of God, right? So they're believers, they are fuqara, they are poor, but they're also believers, right? And then He says, La yastati'una darban fil ard. He says, these people, even though they have belief, they just can't get ahead in this world. Yeah, they can't establish anything for themselves where they can get ahead, right? So these people try business, it didn't work. They try working, bills piled up, something else happened, they had to be in debt. And so these people are just stuck in this vicious cycle. But then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala adds to the quality that they have. He says, يَحْسَبُهُمُ الْجَاهِلُ أَغْنِيَا. Yeah, that the ignorant people around them think that they are wealthy, that they are well off, right? So they don't recognize that these people are faqir, right? They don't recognize that these people are indigent. Why? مِنَ التَّعَفُّفِ. Yeah, because they don't beg. Yeah. They practice self-control. You know how hard it is when you are in debt and you really need something to not ask somebody else for it and just put your trust in God? Man, that's tough, right? What do we end up spending most of our nights awake from? Because we have a bill and we can't afford to pay it, right? We want to get something and we can't afford to get it. How will I pay this? It keeps us up at night. But Allah says that these people, they practice iffa. Yeah, they practice self-control. And so this is an example where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about self-control, self-restraint. Now, how do we practice self-restraint? This can be like a multifaceted discussion. So there are internal aspects of practicing self-restraint, and then there are external factors. So the internal factors, I'll just go through them really quickly, right? But I think each one of this deserves its own time. That how do I develop self-restraint? So the first one aspect is that I need to recognize what my deficiencies are, or what my weaknesses are, right? This is kind of what taqwa is, right? It's a shame that I can become a grown man or an adult, man or woman, I can become an adult and still repeat the same mistakes that I did when I was a kid, right? So like as a kid, I always got angry when someone, like, I don't know, ate the last kebab or something, right? And now as an adult, I come to mosque and somebody ate the last kebab and I get angry. How about grow up, right? Like you didn't change, you haven't changed. You should know that's your weakness, kebabs, you know what I mean? Change. As adults, we should know what our weaknesses are. We should know what we will always be a victim to, right? So if it's the opposite gender, then I pay more focus to that. If it's music, I pay more focus to that. If it's money, I pay more focus to that, right? Like, one of the great benefits of, one of the great tools to enhance spirituality and to awaken the hearts is to practice silence, right? Just to be quiet. And when we talk about silence, this is, I don't even know if it's coming up, but if it is, I'm just like stealing my own topic, Like silence, we're not talking about just not talking. We're talking about an environment of silence. So where I put my phone aside, I turn off the radio. So it's not just about me not talking, but I'm not distracted by things, So just to be able to be by yourself. It's a really powerful tool to awaken the heart, and it's something that's rare. People don't do it. We don't have time for silence today, right? We like to constantly occupy ourselves. Get in the car, radio. Again, people talk, and then my phone when I get, it's on constant, right? We have to carve out time for silence. But one of the things that silence does is that it allows you to kind of focus on where your thoughts go. Yeah, try it. It's really interesting. But then focus on where your thoughts are going. Our scholars describe thoughts as like birds who fly from tree to tree. So right now I'll think of this, and then I'll see something and I'll think of that and something else. And so my bird will fly from tree to tree, but what you need to focus on is where does this bird land eventually? Yeah? So if the bird lands on a tree about money, and if you pay attention long enough, you'll notice, man, I keep thinking about money, right? And so money is a problem for me. So I have to learn to control that. It's a really good trick. Yeah, try it. Just focus on where your thoughts land. And oftentimes they will always land on what your biggest problem is, right? And so we have to know what our deficiency is, what our what our kryptonite is, basically, right? Like we have to know what our kryptonite is, and if we can know what our kryptonite is, then I can avoid those particular things so that I don't make the mistakes that I have, or I add more security and guards of my soul around that. So number one, how do we practice self-restraint? Know what your own tendencies are, right? Rahimallahu imra ya'raf qadrahu. Yeah, the hadith says that blessed are the people who know their own self-worth. They know them about themselves, right? Like when children make certain mistakes, I get it. You know what I mean? I don't condone it, but we get it. But when adults make it, it's a shame. It's a shame. So another thing is, another way to practice self-restraint it's a part of jihadun nafs, but it's to create like punishments for yourself. You know what I mean? Like, so if you know that this is a problem for me. So let's say waking up for Salatul Fajr is a problem for me, right? And I just can't do it. But then I really want to do it, but I just don't do it, or I can't do it. And so if it's something that's important to me, and it should be, because God should be the most important thing, right? Then I will create certain like penalties for every time I miss Salatul Fajr, for example. So I will do everything I can. So for example, I will keep like my phone far away from me, so that when my alarm goes off, I have to get out of bed to go turn it off. You know, like I always, it's like, I don't understand, yeah? People tell me I can't wake up for Salatul Fajr. I said, where do you keep your phone? They're like, right next to me. I'm like, obviously you're not going to wake up for Salatul Fajr, right? You'll just hit off and you'll go back to sleep. Like, you won't even remember hitting off, and then be like, oh, but I couldn't wake up. No, like, put it far away, right? Like, why would you keep something like that? You know, like, it doesn't make sense to me. Like, for me, like, if I ever end up staying up super late and I'm out and I'm doing something, like, I'll sometimes even keep the phone right by the bathroom door, right? So like, I gotta get up and go all the way across the room, and then I'm already at the bathroom. Might as well go do wudu, right? Because you don't want to mess around with it, right? So you set yourself up, and then if you still happen to miss it, you punish yourself, right? So whatever you like to do, you deprive yourself of that at that particular moment, right? So if money is valuable to you, then you say, I'm going to donate money, right? So you give an extra amount of sadaqah for every salah you miss. If, I don't know, dessert is your thing, you deprive yourself dessert for a week, for example, right? If fasting is hard for you, you punish yourself with one fast, for example. But you got to stick with the principle. You have to stick with it. You can't just threaten a punishment and then forgive yourself at the same time, right? Like, it doesn't work like that. You punish, you threaten it, carry it out. But that is essential. If you can, like, how do great people achieve great things? Yeah, they have great control over their souls, yeah? And they're willing to take any measures to control it. So this point is also really important. And again, these are all parts of like jihadun nafs, and each one of these deserves its own time. So these are internal factors. Internal factors are basically factors that have to do with me, right? So knowing myself, punishing myself, setting conditions for my success. So these are things that we can do to control and practice self-restraint. Then there are external factors. External factors, we'll talk about one tomorrow, and that is like our family environment. If we have the right family environment, it can help us become better servants of God. Another aspect is friends. What kind of friends do I have? Right? Friends have a huge impact in my ability to control my desires, right? I just gave a series of Jummah khutbahs on this a few weeks ago. So that's in itself another discussion. But I want to talk about one that's really, like, to me, like, this is one of the most important external factors that I have like experienced, right, and seen, and that is the environment that I create for myself, right? We're not talking about like summer or spring. No, we're talking about like, what do I expose myself to, right? What kind of lifestyle do I live? What are my daily encounters? Because the environment that we expose ourselves to, right, has a huge impact on my ability to control myself. A huge impact. You know, they call our, like, when the environment triggers a certain response, they're known as environmental triggers, right? And environmental triggers are real things, right? So like, you Google this, environmental triggers, and it'll give you like a list of studies, right? Like small things, like if you want to be more cleanly, more clean, you just have a soft scent of lemon around you. It will prompt you to become more clean, right? Just an environmental like adjustment will produce certain results, right? There's a study that I really like. Read it a long time ago, but it's like from a 2008 study, but it was in the journal called Science. It said that they had two groups of people, and they broke them up into two similar backgrounds, similar age groups. So quite a similar groups that they had, and they placed one group in a really cold, in an uncomfortable environment. So a room where the AC was really high, and they gave them cold drinks. They weren't allowed to bring jackets and sweaters. So it was just an uncomfortable place, right? And then they placed the second group, similar background of people, in a much more comfortable environment. So it was properly like temperature, they were given a nice drink, they were comfortable. And then both of these groups of people were given the same exact story to read. And then they were told to analyze this story. The group that was in the cold room because their temperament was changed because of the uncomfortable nature that they were in, when they were asked to describe the main character in that story, they said that that main character was mean and hard-hearted, right? Because that's how they interpreted it. And the same story, that other group, that same character, they said was warm and loving. Yeah? Complete different understanding of that story, only because the environmental factors in each group were different, right? Like this happens to all of us. So one day, I may have a pleasant drive here, and you see me, and you say, Salam, Sheikh, and I say, Salam, I'm all smiles and stuff. Tomorrow, next day, there's a traffic bumper to bumper, I'm not in a good mood anymore. Right? You say, Salam, I ignore you, you think I'm a bad Sheikh, right? But my environmental thing changed, right? And that prompted a specific response. And this is something that you and I have to be really, really cognizant about. That these are like small examples that we give. Just a tweak in this environment, tweak in that thing, can actually change how we think. Now imagine if we surround ourselves or immerse ourselves in environments that contradict the values that God has for us. Yeah? What kind of perception will I have at that moment? Right? Like if all my friends do things which are haram, if I watch TV and everything that they display is problematic, or a lot of the things are problematic values-wise, whatever I see, whatever I experience is problematic, like maybe long-term, like I may end up doing those things. Yeah, if I hang out with friends who do things improper, only to a certain degree will I be able to say no, right? After a while, maybe, and maybe inshallah we don't, right? But the short term, what will happen? And we talked about this like 2 days ago. Short term, the result of that type of environment and purposely immersing myself in that environment will lead me to say, what's the big deal? They drink, I don't drink. What's the big deal? They smoke, I don't smoke. What's the big deal? They have this lifestyle, I don't have this lifestyle. We have to respect everyone, right? And what happens is that which God has said is a big deal, I say, what's the big deal? That's a value switch. Yeah? That's a huge value switch. And so my house, if my mentality is what's the big deal, I'm going to find a spouse that says what's the big deal. 2 generations down, that will happen in my house, for sure. Because it was never something I considered to be a big deal. Right? Why? Because of the environment, right? Because of the environment. You know, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He talks about this in the Quran. In Surah number 7, verse 58, He says, وَالْبَلَدُ الطَّيِّبُ وَالْبَلَدُ الطَّيِّبُ. He says, a good land. Yeah, tayyib is like a good, wholesome land. وَالْبَلَدُ الطَّيِّبُ يَخْرُجُ نَبَاتُهُ بِإِذْنِ رَبِّي. That the vegetation in a good land comes out with the permission of its Lord. وَالَّذِي خَبُثَ. But the land that is spoiled, لَا يَخْرُجَ إِلَّا نَكِدًا. That the vegetation hardly comes out nicely. Very few come out nice. كَذَلِكَ نُصَرِّفُ الْآيَاتِ لِقَوْمٍ يَشْكُرُونَ. This is how we show you our signs for those who are grateful. Like God's not giving us farming advice here, you know. That good land or a bad land is the environment we are in. He says those who put themselves in a bad land, very few will come out successful. But those who put themselves in a good environment, you have more chances of being successful, right? Like when we live in this world, like, well, I'm not saying that this is a bad land. Like I'm a product of this land. A lot of us are products of this land, right? But what we are saying is that look, with everything that's happening in this world, we have to be like super vigilant what we expose ourselves to. Super vigilant, right? So like if things are happening which are haram, I have to avoid them, right? Like even though we live in this multicultural world and this multicultural environment allows me the freedom to say that I don't accept this value. Right? Not that I have to change my value for your value. That's not multiculturalism, right? But that's what they ask of us. They ask of us to change our values to meet their values when that's not what's expected. I will say that's your values, do what you want. These are my values, respect them too, right? And we have to be comfortable in our skins to be able to stick to our values. And so these are things that are externally, but internally, man, we have to be like super careful, right? Like we have to be careful and mindful of what we watch on the TV or on the internet, right? Like we can't just be like, I'm gonna watch any movie. You know, I had a like one time I was with somebody and the guy was like, yeah, you know, we watched this movie. And he's like, but I saw it was inappropriate, so we sent my kids upstairs. And I was like, dude, what made it okay for you to watch it? Right? Like, if it wasn't good for your kids to watch it, what made it okay for you to watch it? Like, you know, like we think like that. Bache ke liye nahi, like, mere liye I'm okay, I can do it. No, you can't, man. You can't. It's not possible to put yourself in a bad environment and not have that affect you. Not possible. You can close your eyes and see those things. You can close your eyes and experience those things. We remember these things, right? We have to be super careful what we watch, what we let our kids watch. Man, like our kids have access today. Imagine like if we had that access. You know what I mean? Like we were all young at one time. You know what I mean? We still messed around and did things we weren't supposed to. But imagine if we had the access that the kids have today. My goodness, right? And yet it goes unfettered, unchecked. We let them have it. We can't. We have to be these parents who are involved. What did you learn? What did you see? What's going on? Let me see. Let me learn. We can't just be these parents, be like, everything okay at school? Fine. Bas khalas, my job is done. No, sit with your kids. Find out what's happening. What are they learning? What did you learn? Let me see your books. It's okay if they roll their eyes at you. Yeah? It's okay if they throw a fit. It's not gonna break anything. Yeah, fine, let them throw a fit. But let me be part of this. Let me learn. They'll appreciate, I swear to you, they'll appreciate it when they get older. Yeah? If you handle it tactfully, if you handle it correctly, right, without being this culturally dominating figure, if you just handle it correctly, right, kids will appreciate you later for being a parent who cared, as opposed to a parent who didn't care, right? And this is something that we have to be really, like, we have to just control our environment, you know? Like, we have to control what we watch, what we see, where we go on vacation. You know what I mean? Like, sometimes people will tell me, I went here to this beach place. And I was like, subhanAllah, you kept your eyes on the ground the whole time? Yeah? I was like, I was like, seriously, you were able to? Like the whole time you walked around looking down? I was like, how? Like, why would you put yourself in those environments? I swear you'll get it in Jannah one day. I swear you will. Yeah? Inshallah. The best 5-star resorts. But you don't need to put yourself in an environment in this world where you just have to now fight another battle. You understand? Because that's all we're doing. We're just fighting more battles. Let me tell you, like, what we're talking about here, the ability to control, you know, like it requires like a high level of maturity of faith, where I'm willing to put aside my desires for the desires of God. Like, you know, when we talk about maturity, part of the maturity is maturing our faith. Like, why am I doing the things that I'm doing? If you analyze like our lives, you know, there are so many distractions and temptations that we don't have control over. So many. Like, I can't control who's gonna sit next to me in class. And she may smell good, he may look good, whatever. I can't control that, right? I can't control who's gonna sit next to me on a plane. Yeah? That could be a long 8-hour journey. You know? I can't control who's gonna sit next to me on a bus. You can't control these things. You can't control who your coworker will be, how she dresses or how he dresses, right? But man, like the things that we can control, you should. Yeah, you should. You don't need to add more than that which has already been added for us. You understand or no, right? You have to be able to control this. And I give this example. Sometimes, you know, like, be careful what you say to me. I will use it on a majlis, yeah? But this one kid, you know, a young guy, not a kid, like, you know, like a young man, you know, he said, you know, Sheikh, when I used to fly before, he's like, secretly, I would wish someone cute would sit next to me. Yeah, he said secretly. He said, I wouldn't tell anybody, right? Like, so maybe he's like, I don't do anything haram, but maybe we'll just strike up a conversation, right? But he's like, I swear to you now, I pray, Ya Allah, don't let someone cute sit next to me. Yeah. He's like, I don't need that headache. Like, I genuinely don't need that temptation. Should I say something? Should I not say something? Should I? No. He says, I don't want that temptation. That is a maturity of faith, yeah? Honestly, that's a maturity of faith when you don't want more temptations around you. And you don't want more difficulty around you. And this is where we have to be very mindful of these things, because at the end of the day, the environment that we lived in is not going to be a justifiable excuse to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Like, I'll be like, Ya Allah, but I was in Canada. Yeah, you saw how people dressed in Canada, right? You saw how hot the summers were in. It's not an excuse God will accept. How do we know? Because God tells us in the Quran it's not a good excuse, right? One of my favorite verses of the Quran, 497, Nisa, Surah An-Nisa 97. Remember this, go back and read it, 497. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says what? He says, إِنَّ الَّذِينَ تَوَفَّاهُمُ الْمَلَائِكَةُ ظَالِمِي أَنفُسِهِمْ. He says that those whom the angels caused to die while they were doing zulm to themselves. Yani zulm to themselves is what? Sinning, right? They were doing things they shouldn't have been doing. When we do something we shouldn't be doing, we're not hurting God, we're hurting ourselves. We're doing zulm to ourselves, right? And so Allah says that when the angels cause these people to die while they're doing dhulm to themselves, قَالُوا فِيمَا كُنْتُمْ. The angels will ask them, like, why were you doing this? فِيمَا كُنْتُمْ. Why were you in this condition? And what is their jawab? They think they're smart. قَالُوا كُنَّا مُسْتَضْعَفِينَ فِي الْأَرْضِ. We were da'if. Yeah, bicharata. Yeah? Like, what could I do? Like, look at where I lived. It was so hard. I couldn't do anything. And they'll be singing their own sad song. Yeah? And look at the angel's jawab. Yeah? The angel's jawab is classic. Yeah? He says, قَالُوا أَلَمْ تَكُنْ أَرْضُ اللَّهِ الْوَاسِعَةَ فَتُهَاجِرُوا فِيهَا. Allah says, the angels will reply back, was Allah's earth not big enough for you to go somewhere else? Yeah? What made you stay there? Yeah? What made you live there? And this living is not like transferring balads, yeah? Transferring countries. No. Right? Like, if I am on a bus seat and someone that I know is going to cause me a problem, if I move just one seat over, that's like a migration to Allah. I swear to you. Yeah? The Prophet has a hadith, sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam, Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad, where he says, Man farra bidinihi fi ardin ila ard. He says, one who like escapes, far, yeah, min al-farrar, yeah, one who escapes because of their religion from one piece of land to another. وَإِن كَانَ شِبْرًا مِنَ الْأَرْضِ. Even though that could be the span of a hand, yeah, a span of a hand. You're standing here, it's not a good place to be, I'll come stand here. I did it, why? Because I'm protecting my deen. Yeah, I'm protecting my religion. What does the Prophet say? Istawjab al-Jannah. Jannah becomes wajib for such people. Yeah. وَكَانَ رَفِيقُ أَبِيهِ إِبْرَاهِيمُ وَنَبِيهِ Muhammad. He says, sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. Salli ala Muhammadin wa alihi. He's like, and they become companions of my father Ibrahim and mine. Yeah. Subhanallah. A small change in the environment. I'm telling you, we can do this. Yeah, we can try to see what we are exposed to and how we can control it. And this is something that if we do on a consistent basis, then self-restraint is not going to be a difficult or a foreign concept for me. I'll have full control over my soul. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Tonight we continue our remembrance of the musibah that befell upon the household of the Prophet. And today I want to remember that young daughter of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, a daughter that is affectionately known as Sakina. You know, I want you to put yourselves in the shoes of a 3 or a 4-year-old. A thirsty 3 or 4-year-old who the entire day of Ashura, she was watching what was going on around her. She would see her brother Aliyun al-Akbar go, and she would wait for him by the tent, but Aliyun al-Akbar did not come back. She would see her cousin Qasim go. She would wait for him too by the tent, and he would not return. Finally, she would see her uncle Abbas go. Abbas was that individual. Amongst the many things that Abbas did, Abbas brought hope to the Ahlul Bayt. Hope. And so when Abbas was going for water, it brought hope in the heart of Sakina. And so she must have waited by that tent waiting for her uncle to come back, but Abbas did not come. And after a while, Sakina understood that anyone who goes does not come back. And so when her father said, Assalamu alaykunna, that my salams to you, O the daughters of the family of the Prophet, we are told at that time Sakina rushes to Imam al-Hussein and hugs him, and tears begin to come down from her cheeks. And the Imam, hugging his daughter, says, Sayatulu ba'di ya Sukaynatu fa'alami minkil buka'u idhal himamu dahani. He says, O Sakina, know that after me, your tears will be prolonged because of my death. But while I am still alive, do not break my heart with the sound of your cry. That Sakina, don't cry yet. Don't cry yet. It hurts me when you cry, Sakina. This is the madhlumiyat of Hussein. They say that one of the titles of Imam al-Hussein is that he is known as Qatilul Abra. That whenever a believer is mentioned, whenever his name is mentioned, believers will shed tears for Hussein. But some say that this Qatilul Abra means something else too. It means that he was that Qatil, that Shaheed who was made to cry before his own Shahadat. That all through the day of Ashura, Hussein cried. When Aliyun al-Akbar fell, Hussein cried. When Aliyun al-Asghar fell, Hussein cried. When Abbas fell, he cried. And when Sakina cried, Hussein cried too. It broke his heart and he cried. But Sakina was right. Those who leave do not come back. But who came instead? The army of Yazid came instead. They burned down these tents. They slapped these cheeks. They pulled off these earrings. And through all this, Sakina, we are told, runs out towards the battlefield screaming, Baba! Where are you, Baba? No one's there to look after me, Baba. Come. We are told when everything settles down, Zainab finds Sakina on the chest of Imam al-Hussein. We ask Sakina, how did you find the chest of... The head had been removed from the body had been trampled. How did you recognize it? I wonder if when Sakina was calling Baba, a voice called back and said, Ilayya, Ilayya, ya, come to me. I will give you comfort. We wish, we pray that this would have been the end of her suffering. But we know Sakina saw so much more. She saw her aunts having rocks thrown on them. She saw them being paraded without a hijab. She saw her brother Sajjad wearing chains around his necks in the hot heat, that whenever he would breathe or swallow, these necks would pierce his throat. She saw all that. Imagine the heart of that child, the heart of such a young child, to see all that. It is said in that dungeons of Sham one day, Sakina's heart could not take it anymore. And she started calling for her father. She said, where is my father? Where is my He just said the tears of Sakina were such that every person in that prison began to cry. When the sounds reached the Mal'oon Yazid, he said, what does that child want? They said, she wants her father. So they set the head of Hussein on a tray with the handkerchief that was covering. I wonder if she thought that was food. Sakina didn't want food. She didn't want food. She wanted her father now. And when that tray and the handkerchief was removed, she looked at the head and said, Ma hadha. She said, whose head is this? They said, Innahu rasu abik. This is the head of your father. Sakina, we are told, hugs the head of her father and said, Ya abata, man alladhi qata'a waridi. He says, who is the one who beheaded you? Ya abata, man alladhi aitamani ala sighari sinni. Who has made me an orphan at this young age? Ya abata, Man lil yatimati hatta takbur. Who will look after this orphan until she grows up? She cried until we are told she put her head on the head of Hussein. And then finally this young child stopped crying. The women and children felt that, finally this child will now get some rest. But when Sajjad comes to this young child, he says, Inna lillah wa inna ilayhi raji'un. That no, my Auntie Zainab, that she has gone back to Allah. Inna lillah. فَسَيَعْلَمُ الَّذِينَ ظَلَمُوا أَيَّ مُنْقَلَبٍ يَنْقَلِبُونَ وَالْعَاقِبَةُ لِلْمُتَّقِينَ إِنَّا لِلَّهِ وَإِنَّا إِلَيْهِ رَاجِعُونَ. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to hasten the return of our Imam. We ask Him to forgive the sins of our parents and loved ones. For those who are going through difficulty, that He end their difficulty. For those that have asked us to pray for them, Ya Allah, accept their hajat. Rabbana taqabbal minna innaka anta as-sami'ul alim wa tub alayna innaka anta at-tawwabur rahim. Matam Hussein. Ya Hussein.
बर्बाद हुई मैं, आबाद हुई कर्बो बला, उजरा मदीना बर्बाद हुई मैं। ज़ैनब को नरासाया मुहर्रम का महीना, बर्बाद हुई मैं, आबाद हुई आबाद हुई कर्बो बला, उजरा एक दिन था कि इस शहर की करती थी मैं शाही, और आज तबाही, और आज बेगुस्ले परा मोरे नबूवत का नगीना, बर्बाद हुई मैं आबाद हुई करबला उजड़ा मदीना, बर्बाद हुई मैं आबाद हुई करबला उजड़ा मदीना, बर्बाद हुई मैं। किस लाश पे रो किस छोरूं मैं बरादर, लाशें हैं बहातर, लाशें हैं बहातर। हद ये है कि रोने की इजाजत भी मिली ना, बर्बाद हुई है आबाद हुई करबला उजड़ा मदीना, बर्बाद हुई मैं आबाद हुई करबला उजड़ा मदीना, बर्बाद हुई मैं। असगर का गला भाई कसर सीना अकबर, सब गोहरो चादर, सब गोहरो चादर। इस दाश्त में लूटा गया ज़ैनब का खजीना, बर्बाद हुई आबाद हुई करबला उजड़ा मदीना, बर्बाद हुई आबाद हुई करबला उजड़ा मदीना, बर्बाद हुई माए बिना पहचान सकी बच्चों के चेहरे, बिखरे हुए सहरे, बिखरे है खून की दरिया में गरीबों का सफीना, बर्बाद हुई मैं आबाद हुई करबला उजड़ा मदीना, बर्बाद हुई मैं आबाद हुई करबला उजड़ा मदीना, बर्बाद हुई मैं। एक आगे है खैमों में कयामत का समा है, गाजी तू कहाँ है, गाजी तू कहाँ है। देखो तो रिदा छीने गया मेरे कमीना, बर्बाद हुई आबाद हुई करबला उजड़ा मदीना, बर्बाद हुई आबाद हुई करबला उजड़ा मदीना, बर्बाद हुई या हुसैन या हुसैन या हुसैन या हुसैन या हुसैन भैया तेरे चहलुम के लिए आई है ज़ैनब, भैया तेरे चहलुम के लिए आई है ज़ैनब, भैया तेरे चहलुम के लिए आई है ज़ैनब, भैया तेरे चहलुम के लिए आई है ज़ैनब। जिंदा में लहद बाली सकीना की बना कर भाई की अमानत को तहे खाक छुपा कर, साथ अपने लुटे काफिले को लाई है ज़ैना। भैया तेरे चहलुम के लिए आई है ज़ैना, भैया तेरे चहलुम के लिए आई है ज़ैना। माँ जाए कमर कद पा है दुखिया का ये नोहा, आई है बहन मिलने को उठो मेरे भैया, बिन तेरे हर एक गाम पे दुख पाई है ज़ैना। भैया तेरे चहलुम के ये आई है ज़ैना, भैया तेरे चहलुम के ये आई है ज़ैना। बेमकनाओ चादर गई बाजारों में भैया, दरबार यजीदी में गई दोख्तर ज़हरा, था हुक्म जो तेरा वो बजा लाई है ज़ैना। भैया तेरे भैया तेरे रंजो अलमो यास है अब्बास नहीं है, जुज़ आबिद बीमार कोई पास नहीं है, बस एक अमानत ये बचा लाई है ज़ैना। भैया भैया तेरे चहलुम के फरियाद कुना भाई की तुरबत पे बहन है, अब गौहर शबीर का नौहा ये हसन है, हर गम पे तन्हाई का गम खाई है ज़ैना। भैया ये आई है ज़ैना, भैया तेरे चहलुम के लिए आई है ज़ैना। या हुसैन 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 अल्लाहुम्मा सल्ली अला मुहम्मद।
मुतवज्जह ज़ियारत।
अस्सलामु अलैका या रसूलुल्लाह, अस्सलामु अलैका या अमीरुल मोमिनीन, अस्सलामु अलैका या फ़ातिमतुज़ ज़हरा सय्यदतुन निसाइल आलमीन, अस्सलामु अलैका या हसनुल मुज्तबा व रहमतुल्लाहि व बरकातुहू, अस्सलामु अलल हुसैन व अला अली इब्नुल हुसैन व अला औलादिल हुसैन व अला अस्हाबिल हुसैन। अस्सलामु अलैका या अबा अब्दुल्लाह व अला तिस्अतिन मिन बनीक अली इब्नुल हुसैन व मोहम्मद इब्न अली व जाफ़र इब्न मोहम्मद व मूसा इब्न जाफ़र व अली इब्न मूसा व मोहम्मद इब्न अली व अली इब्न मोहम्मद अल हसन इब्न अली। अस्सलामु अलैका या हुज्जतुल्लाह या इब्नुल हसन या साहिबुल अम्र वल अस्र वज़ ज़मान सय्यदी मता तराना व नराक अज्जलल्लाहु मा वअदका मिनन नस्र व दुहूलिल अम व रहमतुल्लाहि व बरकातुहू। अल्लाहुम्मा सल्लि अला मुहम्मद व आले बिस्मिल्लाहिर रहमानिर रहीम। अल्लाहुम्मा कुल्लि वलियकल हुज्जत इब्नुल हसन सलवातुका अलैहि व अला आबाए फी हादिहि साअ व फी कुल्लि साअ वलियम व हाफ़िज़ा व क़ाइदन व नासिरा व दलीलन व ऐना हत्ता तुस्किनहु अर्ज़का तौआ व तुमत्तिअहु फ़ीहा तवीला बिरहमतिका या अरहमर राहिमीन। अल्लाहुम्मा